Return of the Living Dead is the real timeline. Night of the Living Dead is the cover-up. For decades, fans treated Return of the Living Dead as a comedy spoof, a parody, a self-aware joke riffing on Romero's classics. And on the surface, that's exactly what it looks like. Punks in a graveyard, wisecracking mortuary workers, zombies screaming for brains. But hidden underneath all of that is one of the most clever pieces of meta-storytelling in horror history, and writer-director Dan O'Bannon confirmed it was all intentional. Here's the theory. Return of the Living Dead doesn't take place in a fictional universe where zombies are imaginary. It takes place in the real world, our world, a world where George Romero's Night of the Living Dead exists as an actual film that actual people have watched. Early in the movie, mortuary worker Frank pulls new employee Freddy aside and tells him about the barrels in the basement, military canisters containing a chemical called trioxin. And then Frank says it directly. You know that movie, Night of the Living Dead? That was based on a true case. The Army actually had a problem like that back in '69. That single line is the entire theory. Romero's film isn't fiction in this universe. It's a dramatized account of a real outbreak that the government buried. The trioxin barrels arrived in the basement in 1969, 1 year after Night of the Living Dead released in 1968. The timeline fits perfectly. The military contained the original incident, handed the story off to Romero as a way to quietly release the truth without accountability, and then accidentally sent the physical evidence, the actual barrels, to the wrong address. O'Bannon confirmed in interviews that this layered reality was the entire point. He was deliberately navigating copyright issues with Romero's estate while also creating something smarter, a film that canonizes Romero's work as fact within its own world. And the genius of it is what happens next. Because the characters in Return have all seen Night of the Living Dead, they know the rules. Destroy the brain. That's how you stop them. Except in Return, shooting zombies in the head doesn't work. The trioxin zombies can't be killed that way. So the character's knowledge of the real incident, filtered through a movie, is wrong. The cover-up didn't just bury the truth, it distorted it. The Rage virus was originally designed to create world peace. 28 Days Later opens with animal rights activists breaking into a Cambridge laboratory and releasing infected chimpanzees. The chimps are described as being infected with rage. Full stop. No further explanation. The audience assumes this is straightforward horror logic. Scientists doing something reckless, nature fighting back. But fans noticed a problem with that explanation almost immediately. Why would scientists be engineering rage in the first place? What possible legitimate research purpose involves deliberately making primates more violent and aggressive? The theory that emerged across forums in the mid-2000s reframed the entire origin. The scientists weren't trying to create rage, they were trying to eliminate it. The research program was developing a neurochemical inhibitor, a compound designed to suppress anger, aggression, and violent impulse. The intended applications were obvious: a treatment for violent offenders, a military tool to pacify enemy combatants, potentially a path toward fundamentally reducing human violence on a societal level. The goal, in other words, was peace. The virus mutated during development. The inhibitor inverted. Instead of suppressing rage, it became rage, an airborne neurological agent that strips away every cognitive barrier against violence and floods the subject with uncontrollable aggression. The most optimistic scientific project in human history accidentally created the apocalypse. This isn't speculation. The 28 Days Later, The Aftermath graphic novel, officially produced and canonized by Fox and DNA Films, confirms it explicitly. Scientists named Clive and Warren are shown developing the compound with full documentation of the intended pacifism research. The inversion is confirmed as the mechanism of the outbreak. The tragedy isn't just that the world ended, it's that the world ended because someone was trying to make it better.
Army of the Dead's heist team is trapped in an eternal time loop. When Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead dropped on Netflix in 2021, viewers noticed something strange in the background. Corpses. Not just random zombie bodies, but corpses in very specific clothing, outfits that matched the main cast almost exactly. Different stages of decay. Skeletons at the vault wearing what appeared to be Maria's distinctive necklace. Bodies scattered through background scenes dressed like Scott, like Van der Rohe, like Mikey. In midway through the film, Van der Rohe says it directly. The team has been here before. Look at them. It's us. The theory spread immediately. The heist team isn't making their first attempt on the Vegas vault. They've done this before, multiple times. They fail, they die, and then they begin again, caught in a recursive loop they can't perceive or escape, doomed to repeat the same mission across infinite iterations. The corpses in the background aren't Easter eggs or set dressing. They're evidence, physical remains of previous versions of the same team from earlier failed loops. Snyder confirmed this in a Netflix Geeked interview in May 2021 with no ambiguity. He stated that there are a lot of clues in the movie supporting the theory and that he would say it's true. He explicitly confirmed the background corpses were placed intentionally to represent previous failed attempts. The vault blueprints shown early in the film differ from the actual traps inside, because the blueprints are based on a previous loop's intelligence before the configuration changed. Every inconsistency in the film that seemed like a plot hole is actually a loop scar. What this does to the film retroactively is devastating. These aren't people making a desperate one-time play for survival money. They're trapped in a purgatory designed around failure. Zeus and the Alphas seem to almost anticipate them at points, because on some level, they do. The loop is run so many times that even the zombies carry residual echoes of previous iterations.
The Walking Dead's French scientists created the virus deliberately. Robert Kirkman spent over a decade refusing to explain the Walking Dead outbreak's origin. He said consistently that the cause didn't matter, that the show was about people, not mechanics. Fans respected that. And then, World Beyond's post-credits scene blew the entire mythology open. The scene takes place at a French biomedical facility, Labine DDMI. A female scientist returns alone, hoping to find research that might lead to a cure. A male survivor confronts her at gunpoint, and he doesn't say the virus got loose. He says, "End this? You started this." The graffiti on the wall translates from French as "The dead were born here." Video footage in the facility shows Dr. Jenner from the original Walking Dead series communicating with the French team about variants before the outbreak even began. The fan theory that exploded wasn't just that France was ground zero, it was that the creation was intentional, that the virus wasn't an accident of reckless research, but a deliberate project, a bioweapon, a population control mechanism, or an experiment someone authorized knowing the full scope of what they were releasing. The male survivor's accusation isn't the language of an accident. You don't tell someone who accidentally spilled a chemical that they started something. That's the language of culpability, of a decision made. The Daryl Dixon series expanded this further, revealing synthetic zombie variants with engineered traits, acidic blood, enhanced aggression, modified behavior, proving that French scientists didn't stop experimenting when the world ended. They kept going. The deliberate creation theory remains the most damning reading the franchise has built across 3 separate shows. The apocalypse wasn't a mistake. Someone decided. The I Am Legend infected are not monsters. Neville is. The theatrical cut of I Am Legend presents Will Smith's Robert Neville as an unambiguous hero, a lone scientist, the last good man in a ruined world, fighting to survive and find a cure, while the infected, savage, mindless, violent, hunt him in the dark. It's a clean moral framework, audience surrogate versus monster. Readers of Richard Matheson's original novel knew the whole time that the film was telling the story upside down. In Matheson's book, the infected develop a new society. They have hierarchy, communication, culture. Neville, killing them in their sleep while they're dormant and defenseless, is from their perspective a legendary monster, a creature who arrives in the daylight and murders without warning or mercy. The title I Am Legend doesn't refer to Neville as a hero. It refers to him becoming the boogeyman of a new civilization. He is their myth. He is the horror story they tell. The theatrical ending stripped all of this away after poor test screenings, but the DVD alternate ending, confirmed by director Francis Lawrence as the original intended conclusion, restores it completely. In the alternate cut, the alpha male Darkseeker isn't attacking Neville out of violence. He's trying to recover the female Neville captured and has been experimenting on. The alpha draws a butterfly on the glass, matching the butterfly tattoo on the female's neck, demonstrating not just intelligence, but grief, recognition, and love. Neville realizes he isn't humanity's last defender. He's the monster. He returns her. The infected leave. Lawrence confirmed in multiple interviews that studio pressure and test audience scores forced the change. The intelligent zombie interpretation was always the intended reading. Every scene in the theatrical cut that seems to show mindless savagery was written with the opposite meaning. These are beings defending themselves from someone who never understood what he had become.
Shaun of the Dead's opening monologue is a complete structural map of the film. This one isn't dark, it isn't tragic, it's just one of the most perfectly engineered pieces of screenwriting in modern horror comedy, hiding in plain sight in the first 10 minutes of a film most people have seen a dozen times without ever catching it. Early in Shaun of the Dead, Ed is sitting at the bar in the Winchester pub. He's drunk, rambling, and he lays out a plan for the day. Bloody Mary first thing, a bite at the King's Head, couple at the Little Princess, stagger back here, and bang, back at the bar for shots. It sounds like nothing, throwaway dialogue, the kind of naturalistic filler actors drop in to make scenes feel lived in. It is the entire movie, beat for beat. Bloody Mary is the first zombie they encounter, the woman in their garden named Mary, dispatched with a vinyl record. A bite at the King's Head refers to Philip, Shaun's stepfather, being bitten in the neck. Couple at the Little Princess is picking up Liz and her flatmates, the couple being David and Diane, at her building. Stagger back here is the sequence where the group mimics zombie movement to shamble through the horde toward the Winchester. And back at the bar for shots is the film's climax, using the Winchester rifle behind the bar to shoot through the final wave. Edgar Wright confirmed this was fully intentional on the DVD commentary and has discussed it in interviews ever since. Every word was placed deliberately. Simon Pegg and Wright embedded a complete scene-by-scene breakdown of their film into a drunk pub ramble and then let it sit there, invisible, for 2 decades. It is arguably the most elegant piece of structural foreshadowing in horror film history, and it worked so well that almost nobody noticed it until the DVD came out.
Night of the Living Dead's Venus probe cause is confirmed canon, but only in the books. George Romero spent his entire career being deliberately vague about what started everything. Characters in his Dead series debated constantly. Radiation, God's judgment, a virus, something from space. In Night of the Living Dead, a news broadcast mentions a returning Venus space probe and the possibility that radiation from re-entry contaminated the atmosphere and triggered reanimation in recently deceased tissue. It's presented as speculation, one theory among many. Romero never confirmed it and actively resisted doing so in interviews, arguing that the mystery was more interesting than any answer. Fans who backed the Venus probe theory had 20 years of franchise entries with no resolution, and then 2 separate written expansions of the Dead universe confirmed it from the source. John Russo, co-writer of the original 1968 screenplay, addressed it directly in his novelization, and The Living Dead, the novel that Romero began writing and Daniel Krauss completed after Romero's death, carrying Romero's actual intended mythology, confirms the Venus probe as the definitive cause. The radiation didn't just mutate the atmosphere at random, it targeted and destroyed specific inhibition centers in the brain tissue of the recently deceased, triggering spontaneous reactivation of motor function, while eliminating everything that made the person a person. The film that invented the modern zombie genre never told you what caused it. The novel that the film's creator left behind did. The fans who spent decades pointing at that news broadcast and saying, "It's the probe, it has to be the probe," turned out to be right. They just had to wait for the books to prove it.